All right, for our perfect competition practice 2, we are going to look at these graphs and then some multiple choice questions. So your instructions here say the following firms or industries are all operating in a perfectly competitive market. Illustrate each situation on the graph provided and label all curves in your answers. So they've given you your demand curve, your horizontal demand curve, also known as the price or the marginal revenue. And they've given you your marginal cost curve, which is your Nike swoosh, and your job is to fill in the average variable cost, the average total cost curves based on the instructions that you're given. So we're going to look at this first one together here first. So again, your situation is a firm experiencing economic profit in the short run. So what we're going to do is identify, we know that in order for this firm to be showing economic profit, they have to have the price curve above the average total cost. Anytime price curve is above average total cost, you're going to be operating in a profit situation. So what you're going to have to do is draw your average total cost curve there below your price curve. So this is my average total cost. So remember that my profit maximizing point is going to be where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. That is occurring the way that I've drawn it above my average total cost. So that vertical distance between my profit maximizing output and my average total cost represents my economic profit. So the other visuals that you've seen have shown, okay, this shaded area here would be your economic profit. Now, if you want to, just for practice, you can also draw your average variable cost in there. That's always going to fall below your average total cost. And so that's where we would look for a firm that's producing with an economic profit in the short run. For number 2, it says a firm operating with an economic loss in the short run. So in our first one, notice that our price curve is above average total cost. If we're talking about an economic loss for number 2, we want to identify that our price curve is going to fall between average total cost and average variable cost. So we're losing some money, but we're covering our variable costs. So you're going to draw your average total cost will fall above your price curve or demand curve, but your average variable cost will be below that price curve or demand curve. So again, this area right here, or that point where your marginal revenue equals your marginal cost, is going to be your profit maximizing, or in this case, loss minimizing point of production. This vertical distance between my average total cost and my demand curve represents the amount of loss that I'm incurring right there. So again, the key here is that price falls between average total cost and average variable cost when we're talking about loss minimization. Number 3 says a firm in the classic shutdown position. So in the first one, price was above both cost curves. In the second one, price was between both cost curves. A shutdown position means that your price is below both of those cost curves. So on here, we're going to draw both average total and average variable cost above that profit maximizing point of production. That's occurring below our cost, so it's actually costing us, or excuse me, yes, it's falling below our cost, so it's actually costing us more to produce than if we were to shut down altogether. Our losses are greater if we produce than if we shut down altogether. So this would represent a shutdown situation. At the bottom of the page, we're looking at short-run equilibrium for a firm on the left, industry on the right, and we're assuming economic profit. So in this case, if we're earning an economic profit, it's going to look the same as the graph at the top of the page. Your average total cost and your average variable cost will be below your price curve. And that vertical distance between your marginal revenue equals marginal cost and your average total cost. So that vertical distance, that represents your economic profit. So that would be true for the firm. For the industry, what your text shows is simply that your average total cost curve is derived from, or I should say your demand curve, downward sloping demand curve is derived from your average total cost curve, and then your upward sloping supply curve is derived from your marginal cost curve. So you don't necessarily need to understand all the calculus in that. If you go on to take that at the college level in higher level econ classes, they'll talk about how those curves are derived. What you need to understand is that this is what it looks like for an industry. So firm on the left-hand side, industry on the right-hand side. So the second page of these practice problems, I'll look at more graphs and ask you to make some additional changes. So number 5 says long run equilibrium for a firm and industry. So this comes from your most recent notes that you should have taken on Wednesday or looked at on Wednesday. The long run equilibrium looks very similar to the short run equilibrium. The main difference is that in the long run, remember that time frame is the time frame when the plant size is variable. And so you've got firms entering and exiting the industry. So the long run equilibrium for a firm, the thing that you need to know is our profit maximizing point of production is in the same place. It's where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. But the other curve that will intersect that point is your average total cost curve. So your average total cost curve will intersect your marginal revenue equals marginal cost point at its minimum. And mine may not be quite drawn to scale correctly. I'm doing the best I can here. But the thing that you need to remember in the long run, equilibrium for a firm, your minimum average total cost will equal your marginal cost and your marginal revenue. So those three things come together and intersect in the long run for a firm. On the right-hand side, for the industry, it looks the same as it did in the short run. You've got your downward sloping demand curve, upward sloping supply curve. So again, that traditional demand supply curve on the right is also long run equilibrium for the industry when we're talking about theory of the firm. On the left, the long run equilibrium for a firm is where your minimum average total cost equals marginal cost and marginal revenue. In both situations, you achieve both allocative efficiency, meaning that you're making the right mix of goods, and productive efficiency, meaning that you're producing them at the lowest cost possible. And that's indicated on the right-hand side because your average total cost curve is at a minimum at that point. So minimum possible costs are incurred. Moving on to number 6. It says, illustrate how economic profits will disappear in the long run. Okay, so this one is a little bit trickier to draw. I'm going to try to walk you through it step by step. And then if you've got questions about it, you can let me know. We did talk about this in the notes as well. So what we're saying here is, if we're looking at the firm for the in the first place, how do economic profits disappear in the long run? All right, so if we're operating at an economic profit, what that means is our average total cost curve is going to fall below our price curve or demand curve. And for the sake of simplicity on this graph, I'm going to leave average variable cost off. So there's one less thing that you're looking at because the key idea here is the average total cost. So my initial position is that I am producing here. I've got this vertical distance between my price and my average total cost, which means I'm earning an economic profit. Now, if I'm an entrepreneur, other people are going to notice that I'm making money, and so firms will enter the industry. So let's go to the industry side for just a second. If this is my initial equilibrium point, all right, and I'm making a profit, and other entrepreneurs notice, and so therefore other entrepreneurs will enter the market. And in other words, the number of sellers increases. And if you think back to what you learned about demand and supply, when the number of sellers increases, supply will increase as well. So supply is going to shift right. So that was my original supply curve. This is my new supply curve. And notice what happens is that my price falls. My initial price was here. We'll call that price 1. My new price is here. That's price 2. So going back to my initial individual graph on the left-hand side, I'm going to change colors here. So my price has fallen. It's no longer at price 1. It's now at price 2. So I have this new price curve. Let me make this a little bit bigger. And now notice my economic profit. So my price curve went like this. My economic profit has disappeared. And so I may be operating in a loss minimizing position, or it may be that I have to shut down altogether, depending on what my costs look like for my individual firm. So at this point, we've identified how the economic profits disappear. So sellers enter, more sellers enter, supply shifts right, price falls. When the price falls, that eats up my economic profit. The last question asks you to illustrate how economic losses will disappear in the long run. All right, so let's just assume that we're in this situation of economic losses. So my average total cost curve is above my price, and my average variable cost is below. That's my loss minimizing position. So let's say that you are a business that has weathered the storm. You're in a loss minimizing position. You're just trying to hold on. If we look over here at the long run, we've got our downward sloping demand curve, upward sloping supply curve. This is where equilibrium occurs. But even though you're in a loss minimizing position, not every firm may be in as good as a situation as you are. So some firms will probably shut down and leave the industry. When firms shut down, that means the number of sellers decreases. When the number of sellers decreases, my supply is going to shift left. So actually, this is our second supply curve from the problem that was above this on your sheet. This will be my third supply curve, S3. Notice that when my curve shifts to the left, my price goes up. So looking back over here at my long run equilibrium for a firm, my price curve increases because of that supply shift, and now my price is higher than my average total cost curve. Again, this is out of scale because I'm off my marginal cost curve altogether, but you get the idea. Wherever my point of profit maximization would be, let's just extend this marginal cost. So this is where my marginal cost and marginal revenue curve would intersect. So that would be my profit maximizing point. I have this vertical distance from my price to my average total cost, which means I'm back in economic profit territory. And then as people notice I have a profit, they'll enter the market, supply will increase, price will come down, and so on and so forth. So that's something that's fluid and changing all the time. But the reason why those profits disappear and losses disappear have to do with entry and exit from the industry. Okay, for our last set of questions in this practice, you are looking at a table with information including total output, average fixed, variable, and total cost, and marginal cost. And then there are 4 multiple choice questions that go along with it. So let's talk through these 4 questions together. Number 1 says, refer to the above data. Oops, let me lock this in here. Refer to the above data. If the market price for this firm's product is $68.10, it will produce. All right, so what we're missing in this table is a marginal revenue column. Remember that marginal revenue is equal to price in perfect competition. So if we know that this firm has a price of $68.10. That's also the same as a marginal revenue of $68.10. So we are looking for the point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So as we look down this list, you can see, yeah, nope, not to 68.10 yet. Still no. Okay, 68.07, that might be it. If we go one more step, we can see marginal cost is greater than 68.10 there. And so the answer that we're looking for is what is closest to the marginal revenue price without going over. So 68.07 is going to be where we produce. Now, what that tells us is that at that level, we're producing 8 units, and we've got an average total cost of $51.76, and we're bringing in $68.10 per unit in price. So what that means is if you just think about on a graph, all right, if my price is here, this is 68.10, and my average total cost is 51.76, that would be below. So my average total cost is going to be down here. And anytime my average total cost is below my price, I'm in a profit maximizing position. I can also draw my marginal cost in there. What we're saying is that would be my profit maximizing position. So we're talking about economic profit, and we know that we're producing 8 units. So that reduces our possibilities down to A, to A or to D. In order to figure out whether it's an economic profit of zero or $130.72, remember what you have to do is look at the difference between your price or your marginal revenue or marginal cost and whatever amount your average total cost is at that point. So you know that your average total cost is going to be this $51.76, and you know that your price is this $68.10. So if you plunk it out on your calculator, 68.10 minus 51.76, and then multiply that would be per unit, multiply that times those 8 units, the answer you're going to get is 8 units at an economic profit of $130.72. If the answer is A, your average total cost would also be 68.10. You would be, essentially breaking even. For number 2, if the market price for this firm's product is $35, so let me just highlight that number. If it's $35, it will produce how much? So again, we're looking down this row to see where $35 would occur, or the closest thing to 35 without going over. And here it is right here. So that gives me an average total cost at that point of $50 and a number of units that I'm producing of 6. So we know that the answer has to be either A or B, because those are the only items that give you 6 units as an option. So to find what your loss is going to be, you're taking the difference between the price at $35 and my average total cost at $50. So that'd be $15 per unit times 6. Your answer there is going to be 6 units at a loss of $90. For number 3, it's a little bit trickier, and I promise you, you will not have a question like this on a quiz or a test. I just pulled these out of resources from the text, and so it's a little bit higher degree of difficulty than I'll give you. But let's take a look at it. It says, if the market price for this firm's product is $24, it will produce, so we're looking at $24. Let's go back up here. As we start looking down the row, we notice, okay, we've got $25, that's too high. Perhaps it's 21, but keep in mind we've also got 24 down here. So which one do you use? So price of 24, and we've got marginal revenue of 21 and 24. So, marginal cost of 21 and 24. The thing you have to remember is that a marginal cost curve looks like a Nike swoosh. So this portion of the curve, you're going to have higher numbers followed by lower numbers, and then you're going to see those higher numbers again. Anytime that happens, you want to get off of this portion of the curve. Okay, you want to go past that initial dip of the Nike swoosh to where the curve starts to get higher again. Again, I stipulate this is a confusing issue. So what you need to know is you won't see one like this on the test. But the best answer here is that you're going to produce where your marginal cost is exactly equal, which is at $24, and that is a total output of 4. All right, so looking back at number 3, we have 2 items that allow me to choose 4 units. That'd be 4 units at a loss of $138 or 4 units at a loss of $150. So we're looking again at the difference between $24 and our average total cost at that point, which is $58.50. If you do the math, what you'll find is the difference between those two numbers times 4 will equal $138. And so D is the best answer. For the last question, if the market price for this firm's product is $15, it will produce. So going up here, let me highlight that again. This is $15. Notice the closest thing without going over is right here at $14. All right, but one other thing that you have to look at is, okay, here is my average total cost at that point. Here's my average variable cost. Notice that my marginal cost is less than my average variable cost at 3 units of output. And we already know that any time that your average variable cost is greater than your marginal cost, or is, I should say, is greater than your price. So anytime where your price would fall, if your price curve falls like this below your average variable cost, that is going to be a shutdown situation. So even though it says an output of 3 on that chart, you would actually not produce 3. You would produce 0 units at a loss of 150. So then the question is, okay, where does that loss of 150 come from? Keep in mind, if you're not producing anything, you're not losing any of those average variable costs. The only thing you're losing is your fixed cost. So your fixed cost there is going to be 150, which is why that total loss is going to be 150 as well. If you've got further questions and need clarifications on this, I'm happy to talk through it with you. So you can either email me or you can call or text me at 317-565-7255.